One of the things I'm curious about, so many of the people that I've spoken with who are lucid dreamers, and I don't know if there's an association here, so I'm just throwing something at you to see what your thoughts are, is that they had traumatic childhood experiences. I also had traumatic childhood experiences. And what I'm wondering is, are in any capacity lucid dreams a defensive mechanism for survival so that you don't go like all the way into deep sleep, so that you are aware of your surroundings while sleeping to stay safe?
So, okay, so I'll say one just thing that I want to correct on the previous point, and then I'll answer about the trauma thing. First of all,
Please.
it's correct. Dreams are like movies. So while time in a dream is perfectly aligned with time in reality, it also allows you to cut and move forward. So, in movies, you can see the person when they're 5-year-old, cut, now they're 15, cut, now they're 20. Same thing happening in your dream. So it's not that if you see a dream of you have to wait 17 years to become an adult in your dream. You can jump like this. So in that sense, dreams allow us to jump in time, but when you're walking in the street, it will be the same pace that you walk in the dream. So that's just a correction to what I said before. Time is time, but you can still cut the dream whatever way you want and speed up things or slow down things if you want. Okay, now to your question about trauma. So first of all, we don't have any evidence that lucid dreams are more likely among people who have trauma. It's actually pretty random. Like people who can lucid dream, they're anywhere. I also will say that what we call deep sleep is actually not the dream state. Dream state is closest to being awake. In fact, other than the fact that your eyes are closed, if you look at the brain of someone when they're dreaming in general, not even lucid dreaming, when they're dreaming, the brain looks like it's awake. So the only way we know that they're dreaming is that they are still asleep, that their eyes are still closed. They have this thing called the rapid eye movement where the eyes move, and that's a signal that they're in the REM stage. But in a way, dreams look like awake state.
Mm.
And brain-wise, it's very much similar. Like all the systems in the brain think you're awake. They don't even know that you're in a simulation right now. They think you're in the real world. So what we call deep sleep is actually a different stage in night that happens just before your dream. It's stage 3. It's like the slowest part of the night. That's that. So now to the trauma thing. While we have no evidence that trauma has to do with lucid dreaming or anything, what we do know is that people with trauma who became able to control their dreams, lucid dream, are able to navigate the trauma because two things happen. One is if you have a nightmare, you can just get out of it. So a lot of the studies we do are studies that take people with trauma and we just give them the power to lucid dream, and then in their dream, they can fix things. So imagine that you were in Afghanistan and the attack exploded and you have a trauma of this explosion again and again. We can now give you essentially the power to change the movie. We wake you up, so to speak, during the re-dreaming of the explosion in Afghanistan, but this time you save your friend, or this time you run out of the tank. Or so in a way, we give your brain a chance to create a different VR experience where things are better. So that's one use. The other one is, of course, we can just wake you up. We can just say, okay, if you're going through a nightmare and you just don't want to be there, instead of enduring it, we can make you get out of it. Just wake up. That's a control that you can have when you lucid dream. And the third thing, and that's the most loose one, but that's the one we explore the most right now, is because we know that during sleep, the brain essentially kind of reprogram itself. The brain changes things. We can essentially help your brain eliminate trauma entirely. We can shuffle memories or strengthen memories or weaken other experiences so that when you wake up, the nightmare is no longer as powerful, not just in a simulation. So not just can we use the lucid dream to make you have better dreams, we can also use them as a way to fix things so that when you wake up, the same nightmare looks less terrifying to you as an awake person.
Hey,
That's
what's up, my
fascinating.
friend? We'll be right back to the show. But I wanted to let you know about a brand new feature we are adding to the Think Unbroken podcast, where I'm going to be answering your questions. That's right. If you have a question about healing, trauma, overcoming, or becoming the hero of your own story, all you need to do is go to thinkunbrokenpodcast.com and click Ask Michael a Question, where you'll be able to leave up to a 2-minute voice note for me to answer any question about anything you have about life, your journey, and healing. So head over to thinkunbrokenpodcast.com, click Ask Michael a Question, and I will answer your question on a future episode of the Think Unbroken podcast. And until then, my friend, be unbroken.
One of the things that I fear so many people have come through traumatic backgrounds like me is they go, I have no control over this, and my life is a disaster. This is how God made me, and I must suffer. And I argue, well, that's not actually necessarily true. But one of the things in the lack of control is we seek to find it. And unfortunately, especially in this society, we seek to find it through prescription medication. We seek to find it through things that are not actually to our betterment, to the vices, to the drugs, the sex, the alcohol, the things of that nature. Where does control of your own mind really play a role in this?
So this is also, you're asking amazingly good questions. The control is one of those words that when someone, and you can really relate to this, and anyone who's listening who's been in a dark place, and including, I mean, we've all got our stories. When you're in the depth of despair, the last thing you feel like you have is control, and that's often where support from others comes in. But then there might be cases where you're in a situation, which, Michael, I don't know your full story, but just knowing, working in years of trauma with people, sometimes there is no support. And so therefore you really are on your own, and you can't really see things. And at that moment you do feel complete. I mean, a child who's constantly being abused or going through the most horrific things, where's the control there? And so that then is a child that will go into adulthood with most likely the coping mechanisms to protect oneself, which is, maybe they had to learn to fight back, or, as you say, numb the pain with anything that takes away that pain, and then enter us into our current society where people's stories are no longer really heard, except in a few environments like, the work I do, what you do, etc. You go into the traditional biomedical system, of which, I've been a part, but not in, I do it differently, obviously, as practicing clinically, I'm coming from a different angle. But the traditional system is one of, okay, well, tell me your symptoms, and let's find you a diagnosis, and let's give you a treatment. That works beautifully for cancer and diabetes and, brain tumors and things like that. But when it comes to a complex childhood where there's been excessive trauma, just giving you a label and a medication is not going to fix the problem, because you have a whole bunch of these in your head that make you feel overwhelmed and out of control. So it is a slow process of educating and learning to dive deep introspectively into your wise mind. The wise mind, that inner knowing that got you out to where you are now, where you now are so in a state of wise mind, Michael, that you reach out and help others. And so that process of is a process of empowerment. And it's a cyclic thing that happens over time. And it can be multiple ways. Either someone comes in your life and actually starts helping you, or you reach that rock bottom point and you manage to actually help yourself and pull out of it. There's different ways that it will happen. But hopefully most people reach, and according to the research, oopsie, my little tree's falling over, 3/4 of people will actually reach the point that you have, where they've gone through complex trauma and will get through it with lingering effects. But those lingering effects do not have to be the effects that live with you for the rest of your life, because our current now biomedical model messaging is, okay, well, you are depressed because of a broken brain. Your brain is damaged, and that's it for life. So therefore you need medication to fix it. If you have diabetes, you need insulin. So type 1 diabetes. So you get insulin, it restores it, it heals the body. If you have a pathogen like a virus, like COVID virus, we now have antivirals that can start fighting it. So we can fight it like that. When you have a bunch of toxic experiences, it's as real as a COVID virus. COVID virus is made of protein. So is this experience. It becomes a protein tree-like structure in your brain. So your immune system is going to fight this just as much as it would fight the COVID virus. So this is very deep what I'm saying. And experiences from any stage of your life don't just they're not wishy-washy, go away things. They are physical, structural, protein, chemical changes inside of your brain that look like trees. This is a thought tree that has lots of roots and branches, which are memories. So memories of the experiences coalesce into a thought structure. So this is a collection of a lot of data of what happened, the source over there, and the processing and the interpretation, the different parts, what happened, how you've processed it and coped, and in the interpretation, and how that shows up in your signals. So when this is dominating, when we look at life through this, we do feel out of control. And the control comes back in as we realize this and you get to that point, and it's different for everyone, and it's got different, as I mentioned. Sometimes it's a person that says something to you, or you read something, or people have said they've been on a train and they've seen a sign in a subway, or someone said something to them at a shop, or they just one day just had I don't know exactly what your revelation was, but there's something that shifts. And when you get that shift, there's, instead of this, there's a little bit of this, and then you start climbing up. And what I've tried to do with my work is help people to do that climbing in a way that doesn't make them go backwards, and in a way of understanding. Because to rewire the networks, to take the power out of this and make it small and rebuild healthy new thoughts, where you still remember your story, but no longer does it control you. You are controlling your story, which is evidence in your life. That's not going to happen in one day or with a medication. The medication is not going to fix this. You don't have a brain disease. Obviously, your brain's affected, and I've done a ton of research, and in my latest book, I do explain this, and I have images, and I show my clinical trials in a very simple way, and I have a very simple way of explaining how to do all the stuff I'm telling you. But essentially, this is not the cause. The cause, this in your brain, is not the cause. The cause is what happened to you. This is the manifestation. So the thing happens, the mind experiences the experience that goes in the brain, and the brain and body show up in a messed up way. Obviously, everything you have, the mind needs to use the brain to experience it. So obviously your brain's affected, but it's not the cause. It is the response. So as we manage our causes, as we identify and deconstruct and reconstruct the causes, so we rewire the brain. Full circle back to one of your first questions, which was neuroplasticity. Because of the neuroplasticity of the brain, this work I'm telling you, where we focus from our signals to the thought, to the root, reconstruct, etc., daily, 15 to 25, 45 minutes a day over time, and I'll tell you the time in a moment, that is rewiring the brain. Neuroplasticity for trauma which is the main focus of your podcast, and for anything, building habits, breaking habits, etc., works in cycles of 63 days, not 21, not 1, not 5 minutes. The medications, like the psychotropic drugs, they're not even medications, they're actually drugs. And they're drugs that numb your pain or numb the feelings, but they're not fixing anything. They're making structural changes in the brain that may make you feel better and may help you cope for a time, but they're not going to solve the problem. They may ease it for a time so that you can face and start dealing with issues, but you need to know the side effects. And sometimes the side effects create more problems than what you actually need. Now you've got more problems, brain damage problems on top of the original issues. So, when it comes to psychotropics, it's really important that you fully understand what you're getting into, and that you ask your doctors for the document that they should be giving you of exactly what these are, how they work, their addictive properties, because they're all addictive, and how to withdrawal effects, and to understand that when as you are going through a process of facing stuff, it is painful. And numbing that's not going to help you. You've got to go through the pain. It's called the treatment effect. You're going to get worse before you get better. I've had some patients that start this process, and there's actually one of the stories in my book, Cleaning Up Your Mental Mess, of one of the patients in my clinical trial, who at day 1, no identity, totally depressed, etc. Long story short, by day 21, they were saying things like, I'm not depressed anymore. Day 1, I'm depressed. That was the identity. Life's falling apart, everything you can imagine going wrong. Doing this work daily for 15 to 45 minutes, and we can talk about in a minute what it is. By day 21, they were saying things to us when we brought them back into the clinic to do the evaluations and so on, the brain, blood, narrative, everything. They were saying, I'm not depression. I am depressed because of. That's a massive growth. Then they also said this, but I feel more depressed and more anxious, and I'm having panic attacks, and I'm grieving, but it's different. I'm actually feeling human emotions, and those are valid emotions, because they're starting to see what the pain was from. They had suppressed childhood trauma. In this particular case, this person had gone through terrible childhood trauma and managed to suppress it for all these years and kind of function, but was falling apart. And because these are volcanic, eventually they will explode in your life. Eventually these things will explode. You can suppress for a certain amount of time, but they will eventually explode. And that's what had happened in this person's life. And so they started shifting, but by learning to get control back slowly in these cycles, they started seeing increased depression and grieving as an element of control, because they said, okay, I know I'm depressed because I can see that what I went through, so therefore I should be feeling depressed. That's a very normal human response to those terrible things that I went through in childhood or whatever, and grieving the lost time. And I mean, I'm sure you can relate to this, Michael. So that's growth. But in this society, the minute you feel those, oh, you're sick, there's a disease coming back, you don't have a disease, you're trying to process life experiences, and it will get worse before it gets better, but then it does start changing. And this is why it's so important that you work for the beyond 21 days. Everyone says 21 days. It's not 21 days. 21 days does a major shift. It'll bring things up and you'll start seeing the changes, and you'll start building a new way of thinking, and etc. But if you don't push on for another 42 days, that new little thought is way too small to override this one. You need the extra energy taken from this and put in so that this becomes nice and big and strong. And I'm going to put two next to each other so you can see it becomes nice and strong. Only when the new thought is nice and strong, which takes another 42 days, totaling 63, are you then going to remember your story, but you're not going to be functioning from your story. You're going to be functioning from the new way of thinking. And that process brings control.
Hey, what's up, Unbroken Nation? We'll be right back to today's episode, but I want to take a moment and invite you to Think Unbroken Conference. That's right. Our next conference is happening right around the corner this December with amazing speakers from around the world who are leaders in personal development, trauma education, mindset, and more. All you have to do to register to watch for free, that's right, $0, come and join us, is go to myunbrokenlife.com, register and sign up. You can get access to the free event. Watch it live with us this December. It'll be myself speaking along with amazing human beings like Anthony Trucks, Jamie Bronstein, Leslie Logan, and a special interview that I'm doing with Dr. Gabor Mate that has never before been released. So come and join us, myunbrokenlife.com. All you have to do is put in your email. We'll send you over the registration. You'll be able to come and join us, watch live. And then if you want access to the recordings, there's more information there for you to keep them forever. But in the meantime, go sign up. Block it off on your calendar. This is going to be a transformational experience that you do not want to miss. Head over to myunbrokenlife.com to register for free. Until next time, be unbroken. And I just can't help but think, like, how many times doctors tried to put me on medication. And this was in the late 80s, early 90s. And honestly, I would just throw it away. I used to get in so much trouble, but I was like, I'm not taking this. This is crazy to me. One of the things that really stuck out to me about the title of your book is you labeled it ADHD symptoms. And I think so often people look at this as a mental disorder. So what I think would be very practical to start this conversation with is twofold. One, can you define ADHD? And two, can we look at the symptoms as opposed to this being a disorder?
Excellent question. I love that because it really puts into focus for anyone who's listening that we really have to drill down and see what's going on with the kid. ADHD is a list of symptoms. Real symptoms definitely exist. The kid is struggling. The kid's having a hard time. And these symptoms are caused by many different things, which is why I said before it's extremely simplistic. So in my case, not being able to focus was coming from stress at home. And the minute I was able to work that out, my focus came back into order and I was able to get going and really rise to the top of my class. I was actually SW valedictorian in graduate school. It took a long time to get there. But what we're seeing with kids with ADHD symptoms is difficult symptoms. And what we're not doing is asking the question, why? Why is this child struggling? And there are so many different reasons why a child's struggling. And when I listen to your story, I say to myself, wow, I would have said about you, that sounds like an instant gratification personality, because that's a person who's interested in being active. Things and everything around him is draws him in. He likes to build things, create things, and all that, but they're sticking him into a box he doesn't fit in. Of course, usually ADHD comes with multiple causes. It could be trauma plus a instant gratification personality. We can throw into that screen addiction or other addictions, which are crushing to kids. And we have lack of nature, lack of movement and exercise, which is really bad. And another big one that I see all the time, especially with younger kids, is a gut dysbiosis. So the kids are just not physically healthy. they're not doing well physically. You see runny noses and bad skin and headaches, stomach aches, asthma, allergies, autoimmune conditions. And instead of saying, well, maybe what's going on is physiological, we're saying, oh, he has asthma and a comorbid ADHD. Well, what came first and what's causing what? And that's something that we're not asking the questions of. So when we look at the DSM-5, the diagnostic manual, we just looking at a checklist, and it's kind of like odd to me. And as a mom, when my oldest was diagnosed, I said, well, how did you diagnose her? Well, you see, you filled out this checklist, and the teacher filled out this checklist, and therefore she's got ADHD, which is a neurological condition. And where'd you get the checklist from? And what does that mean? What does that mean to us? It means that we're seeing external symptoms, but shall we ask why she's having these external symptoms? This is a kid who moved to 3 different countries. She's trilingual at the time that she was diagnosed, reading and writing in 3 different languages. Maybe we want to look at her background and see what else might be going on along the way. So the symptoms are real. And what I think is hurting children the most is that we never ask the question why. And that's a real shame.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, I think about quite often this idea that we kind of get pigeonholed into these boxes based on lists that really have no foundational evidence on your particular DNA. And, I think about the idea that doctors particularly, and I'm not trying to like throw doctors under the bus here, I promise, but, you're in this situation where maybe you're ill or you're sick or something's wrong, and they go, oh, it's in your family, it's in your DNA, it's in your genes.
Right.
And I'm like, well, what gene is it? Can you tell me? Can you give me the exact gene that this has been traveled down through for generations that led me to this place? And they can't. They'll be stymied and dumbfounded because it's, for many things, I just don't think it's true. Now, that said, like, I definitely think that you mentioned something about an instant gratification personality. That's really fascinating to me. And what I'm curious about is, are there other personalities that kind of fall within these different chasms?
Well, every personality is different, and personalities are healthy. When you look at yourself, you say, okay, who I'm more similar to, my mother, my father, an aunt, uncle. You're going to find yourself in the family, not perfectly, because you're a different combination of person, but we are going to find ourselves within the family. All personality types are healthy variants of a personality. And therefore, we have to look at it and say, okay, what are the strengths and weaknesses of this personality? I see mainly that instant gratification is we're going to see more ADHD symptoms with that kind of personality. That's that type that's just wants everything here and now and fast and interesting and fun and slightly dangerous. I know my kids were always the ones that climbed to the top of the monkey bars first, and we're just kind of dangling off of it with one leg. So there's that. Of course, you're going to have the ADHD which is the more passive type. The kid who's kind of unengaged, but they're not unengaged. They're in a dream world where everything is fascinating for them, and they're escaping this here and now world, but they're finding something that interests them. They're always finding something else that interests them because they don't want to be where they are right now. So I think those two are very similar, although, and I always use this example that let's say you have a kid who's kind of a shy kid. So a shy kid might do great at tasks that require real good focus and other things like that. But that shy kid is going to struggle when it comes to engaging their environment and making friends. So they have their strengths and then they have their challenges. ADHD, which is when it is caused by an instant gratification, they have their strengths in that they integrate with their environment very quickly. That's the kid who's going to walk over to a stranger and ask a question and learn something new very fast. And that's the kid who's going to find novelty. And I say that this would be an inventor, a scientist, someone who's in high tech, an entrepreneur, someone like you, kind of, getting out there and spreading your voice and your story and helping people out in a very unique way. So those people are the ones that are going to shine there, whereas someone who doesn't engage as quickly because they're shy is not going to do as well in that kind of environment. So we have to look at each environment and figure out what we're going to build. We love that novelty. We love that you're looking for new things all the time and seeing things other people don't see. But we're having trouble with the fact that when you do that, you don't develop habits. You don't develop habits because you're not doing things over and over again, because you're always jumping from one novel idea to the next. Once it gets boring and you have to dot the I's and cross the T's, you don't want to do it anymore. So the two things we're learning is, okay, we've got to work on habits. And number two, we've got to pair you up with somebody who's good at that. Nobody lives in a vacuum. We're in a kind of a weird world where everybody kind of lives for themselves and is expected to be this kind of perfect being. But that's not the way we're meant to live. We're meant to live within community, where one person has a strength in getting out to the forest and finding the food, and the other person has a strength in organizing it when that person brings it home. Now, obviously, I'm going back a couple of generations here, but that's an example for what we would talk about, that we are meant to work together. So one kid's an accountant and the other kid's an entrepreneur. Let's put them together. They're going to make a great team.
How do you really understand your innate abilities and what, call it God gifted, whatever you're born with, that gives you the ability to create success, power, longevity in the life that you want to have?
About 31 years ago, I was the partner in what turned out to be a real successful advertising agency. I had three brilliant creative partners. And I happened upon an assessment. This was literally in 1988. And I happened upon an assessment that was created by this genius at General Electric named Johnson O'Connor. And that assessment was designed to help you understand how you're hardwired, what you're uncommonly good at. It's not IQ, it's not skills, it's not interest, it's not any of those factors. He created a series of assessments, 19 of them, that you can take. When he was doing it, it was 7 hours. And you can take these what are called work samples, and those 19 aptitudes match up to all the occupations and professions on the planet. Again, he's been doing this, or his organization has been doing this for 99 years. So one of our superstars at Hutcheson, my ad agency at the time, had been through this. And she had gone to a good school, and she went off to an Ivy League school and ended up at our place. And she was quite extraordinary. And we were at a cookout July 4th that year. And I said, how did you make your way? How did you figure yourself out? And she told me about this assessment and how seminal it was to her. So, about 2 weeks later, they happen to have an office. They've got 11 offices around the country, and they happen to have an office in Atlanta. And I took this assessment, and it was a eye opener, because it literally told me how I'm hardwired. And what I mean by that is, I was then in my early 40s, and when I was going through school, I was a good student. And my dad wanted me to look at dental school because it was shorter than medical school. Well, I got into my freshman year of college and realized that I didn't have the slightest idea how chemistry works. In high school, you can memorize the formula. In college, you got to understand it. So anyway, I ended up dropping chemistry, picking up philosophy and German, and making a 4.0, and I would have flunked out. So I ended up going, like I told you, I go back, Emory, got out of the Army, and became an entrepreneur. But I found out 25 years later, back to the innate abilities, that my abilities in science are 10th percentile. They measure those. So you know if you have the abilities or aptitudes to be a professional based on how your mind works. And what I did find out is that I have high idea productivity, and I'm a high specialist, and there's several other abilities that make me an inventor and a writer and a creative guy. And I ended up, by the grace of the Great Spirit, following those instinctively, getting into publishing right out of school with no experience, and doing well in that, and then getting into advertising and doing well in that. But I could have found that out at 14, and anybody can find that out at 14. Imagine now, right now, in this complex world where, people are trying to get into the best colleges or technical schools, and, looking to follow their interests, but they don't know if they have the innate capacity to do that. If you don't, it doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means, my favorite metaphor is this genius named Michael Jordan, who was a genius, and then he went off to try to play baseball. Do you remember that story?
I do.
Well, how was he at baseball?
Not that great.
He was horrible. And he's a genius, so he couldn't hit a curveball. So, in fact, he was on the cover, much to his chagrin, of Sports Illustrated with some headline that said, "Come on, Michael." Well, now he went back to the NBA, won several more NBA championships. Now he's a billionaire and a great businessman. but you don't want to be Michael Jordan playing baseball. You want to be Michael Jordan in the flow playing basketball. And so this abilities assessment is the starting point for that. A guy that I was in the Army with for a few years was a brilliant psychologist. We added other factors to that equation. In fact, I should pull this up in here. But we studied the brilliant women and men scientists over the decades. I don't know if you see that. I don't know if that shows up. But there are other factors that play into this whole person model. So you've got your abilities that I just shared, but then what you learn is your skills, your interests, your passions you care about, your personal style, your values, your goals, what age you are, and all of that comes into this equation of what makes you you and allows you to develop a blueprint at whatever age, 14 or 84, where you can actually base your decisions from the inside out. That's why I call it the who instead of the outside in. So that's the executive summary. We've done this for tens of thousands of people, and the assessment has been used over 1 million people. And the empirical results are, if you do these things, we did one study with Fortune 500 companies, and if you do these things, your satisfaction, your performance, the team's performance, your being in the flow increase exponentially.
I love that. And I've had the benefit of spending time and working for Fortune 500 and even Fortune 10 companies, of being exposed to information like, Franklin Covey and Sigma 6 and things of that nature, right? What I'm always interested though more so is because I know that a lot of people listening to this show, they've come through this place, which is a place where I used to be, of not being clear and concise and understanding on who they are. And then they go and they take one of these assessments, they get some ideas, maybe they even do the corporate training, but they still feel trapped, or even worse, they feel scared. They feel the fear of like owning that. So Don, what does one do to like really step into taking ownership of this newfound knowledge?
Well, it's probably one of the great questions of our existence, right? I mean, I think you know this well. I mean, you have to be in your own space. The power of now, as Eckhart Tolle talks about it. Instead of being short-term oriented and success oriented and out of directed, you just have to come to peace with yourself. And there are many modalities for that. There's no one perfect modality. Everything from just being quiet, meditation, yoga, all kinds of different, whatever your spirituality is, it doesn't matter. But until you can be with your own self and trust your own instincts, which, as you said earlier in the show, people are so caught in the matrix and are looking outside themselves, it's impossible to trust your instincts. And until you to do whatever programs you do, whatever introspection, whatever tools you can learn, but then get out there and experience with your innate abilities and your skills and your values. Get experience, do informational interviews, do internships, and find out when you're in the basketball flow instead of the baseball flow, as Michael Jordan found out. And it's a lifetime journey. I mean, I don't care if you're making minimum wage or a billionaire. I mean, why do you think Jeff Bezos went into space? I don't know, but he's still looking, right? I mean, he's done pretty well financially. He's got a great company, but he's still exploring. And so, I think it's one of the seminal tasks that we have while we live on this plane of existence.
Hey, Unbroken Nation, we'll be right back to the show, but I wanted to let you know that you can grab a copy of my first book, Think Unbroken, Understanding and Overcoming Childhood Trauma, for free. If you go to book.thinkunbroken.com, you can download the PDF ebook version of the book and get everything that I know about the baseline of healing trauma for free, downloaded to your email right now. Just go to book.thinkunbroken.com to download your copy of Think Unbroken, Understanding and Overcoming Childhood Trauma for a PDF for your phone. Again, that is book.thinkunbroken.com. Thank you so much for listening to Think Unbroken. Please share this episode with someone who could use it and help us move forward in our mission of ending generational trauma in our lifetime. And if you would, please take 5 seconds to pop on iTunes or Spotify, hit that 5-star, leave a review, and you can also reach out to us on social at Michael Unbroken or at Think Unbroken. And of course, you can check out our YouTube channel at think unbroken. Thank you for being a part of Unbroken Nation, my friends. And until next time, be unbroken.